account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight, the reset commences. We've had a major summit today which saw Keir Starmer forge new ties with his European counterparts. So you tell me, do we need closer links with them or not? And also a big policy announcement, £84 million of new money to be spent on things like health and education in Africa and the Middle East to try and prevent people migrating. Your thoughts on that? And if you've ever played Monopoly, you'll know that Park Lane is one of the most expensive spots on the board. It's one of London's most prestigious addresses. I'm telling you, you will not believe what it looks like today. And there's been a campaign underway now to entice new recruits to the police. Would you join up? And finally, a good news day, everybody, when it comes to Just Stop Oil. Fabulous news. We're going to get into it before 7. All of that and more, but first, the 6 o'clock news.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom tonight, as you've heard, Sir Keir Starmer has announced £84 million worth of new funding, this time to tackle illegal migration. Speaking at the end of a summit of European leaders at Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, he promised to grip Europe's migration crisis. The Prime Minister also says he wants to reset our relationship with the continent and push for closer security ties with other countries. The group has agreed on boosting defence capabilities in Ukraine as it defends itself against Russia. Meanwhile, Volodymyr Zelensky is among the more than 40 European leaders meeting in Oxfordshire, and they're promising more support for Ukraine. Earlier, the Ukraine president said he's counting on Sir Keir Starmer's support.
The UK demonstrated leadership from the very beginning of Russian attacks, and all the strong steps and some not simple steps always UK began. So I count on my meeting. I will have meeting with Prime Minister, and also bilateral one, and also I will have meeting with the government.
President Zelensky at the European Political Community Summit today. Well, in other news, Sir Keir Starmer says today's report from the COVID inquiry confirms the UK was unprepared for the coronavirus outbreak when it happened. In the 240-page assessment released this lunchtime, Baroness Hallett found there were significant and widespread failures from successive governments. The report also condemns the 2011 pandemic strategy for being virtually abandoned when COVID hit, with no focus on economic and social impacts. 10 recommendations were made, including a more simple approach to dealing with health emergencies and conducting UK-wide pandemic exercises every 3 years. The Prime Minister said his government is committed to learning from the inquiry and expressed his heartfelt sympathy to those who lost loved ones during the pandemic. At least 8 more reports will follow today's publication. 5 Just Stop Oil protesters, including one of its co-founders, were jailed today for conspiring to organise protests that blocked the M25 motorway, causing massive disruption for motorists. Roger Hallam, Daniel Shaw, Louise Lancaster, Lucia Whitaker de Abreu and Cressida Gessin organised 45 protesters to climb onto gantries over the motorway for 4 successive days in November 2022. Prosecutors alleged the protest cost the Metropolitan Police more than £1 million and caused more than 50,000 hours of vehicle delays for drivers. Hallam was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment, while the remaining 4 defendants were each handed 4 years imprisonment. Judge Christopher Hehir said the 5 had crossed the line from concerned campaigners to being fanatics. Now, in the United States, the Washington Post is reporting that Barack Obama has told his allies Joe Biden needs to reconsider his election bid. Meanwhile, the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is already reportedly backing calls for him to step aside in the presidential race. White House officials are suggesting she's privately told Joe Biden he cannot win the November the 5th election, echoing a growing number of Democrats who've raised serious concerns about the president's ability to defeat Donald Trump. It all comes after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life on Saturday, which had initially seemed to reduce pressure on Biden to withdraw. The White House and Nancy Pelosi's officials haven't commented, and Democrats are now grappling with a potential shift in their 2024 campaign strategy. And all that coming as Joe Biden has been confirmed now to have pulled out of a campaign after contracting COVID.
I made a serious mistake in the whole debate. And look, when I originally ran, you may remember it, I said I was going to be a transitional candidate. And I thought that I'd be able to move from this, just pass it on to someone else. But I didn't anticipate things getting so divided. And quite frankly, I think the only thing age brings is a little bit of wisdom. And I think I've demonstrated that I know how to get things done for the country.
Here in the UK, 1 person has died and 71 people have been rescued after a migrant boat sank in the Channel late last night. All those on board the vessel ended up in the water, but they were rescued in a joint operation between the UK and France. And 2 prominent MPs, both former government ministers overseeing the Post Office, are being questioned at the Horizon IT inquiry today. Labour's Pat McFadden was Postal Affairs Minister, and Sir Ed Davey, now the leader of the Liberal Democrats, also held the role. They're being asked about errors in the Horizon IT system, which led to sub-postmasters being wrongly convicted of fraud. Those are your latest news headlines. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks very much for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got my panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the visiting Professor of Education at the University of Staffordshire, Tom Buick. Good evening to you and good evening to each and every single one of you guys at home. You know the drill. It's not just about us. It is about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. You can email gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to Twitter or X, or of course, you can go to our website, gbnews.com/yoursay, and be part of the conversation there. But wherever you are tonight, you are very, very welcome indeed. I've got so much I want to talk to you about. Of course, a big summit today with Keir Starmer's European counterparts. That big announcement of £84 million as well of so-called new money that they're going to be spending to try and stop people migrating from Africa and the Middle East. But first, everybody, it's very rare that I can commence the show with good news. Very, very rare. So I want to just take this opportunity to indulge myself with something that made me smile, if you don't mind. Just Stop Oil. It's very, very rare that I cover their ridiculous antics on this programme, because I do personally believe that when they get up to their ridiculousness, if you just ignore them and you starve them of the oxygen of publicity, then they might pack it in with their antics. So hence, I very rarely cover them. However, something good happened today, at least in my opinion, because 5 Just Stop Oil protesters, including one of its co-founders, they've been sent to jail, everybody. You will remember some of these protests. They wanted to organise the M25, for example, causing massive disruption there. Now, I've got to say, they've got some quite strong sentences here. Many people absolutely crying about it. They think it's absolutely appalling, the sentences they receive. I think it's absolutely fabulous, quite frankly. Kelvin Mackenzie, what do you make to it?
Well, I was delighted, and 5 years, and I think 3 of his colleagues got 4 years. This is at Southwark Crown Court, and it's the longest sentence ever for a non-violent protest. So that'll tell you. But you've got to bear in mind, for 4 days, they totally disrupted the M25, caused massive problems, the huge cost of policing. And what the judge said, and I was delighted that there is a judge at Southwark Crown Court who actually knows how to sentence people. After all, he left off 2 Rolex robbers only the day before yesterday, is that he said, you've gone from ordinary peaceful protests, you've become fanatics, and I am going to end this. And the great thing is that this, and I guarantee you this, Chris Packham, right, this is the reason I really enjoy this, is Chris Packham is furious and describes it as a sham, it's a scam. And you know what will happen? On the BBC tonight, it'll be all about Chris Packham weeping buckets of it, and there will be no mention of the people who spent hours and hours on the M25 stranded by this protest.
Tom Buick, what do you think to it?
Well, I do enjoy Chris Packham's Spring Watch or Summer Watch, so hopefully he'll focus more on the television and less on bailing out Extinction Rebellion. I mean, look, we all remember, don't we, some of the disruption that was caused. When I read harrowing stories about one woman, you know, who lost a relative because an ambulance couldn't get through one of these protests. Look, they face justice today. In a democracy, you have a right to protest. I absolutely support that. But you don't have a right to break the law, and you certainly don't have the right to disrupt millions of people, which is what happened over a very long period of time.
I mean, when you look at some of the reaction to this online, I mean, they're calling these people #TheWholeTruth5. And I'm telling you, there's quite a lot of outrage by people who support their antics. Astonishingly severe sentence, says one campaigner here. She says that the judge was completely severe. This was non-violent and absolutely shouldn't have happened. She says, what's happened to free speech? They were trying to protect our planet. They're not violent. They are despairing. That is from Jenny Jones of the Greens there. Dale Vince, you'll be familiar with him. He's absolutely furious about this. He's saying that these peaceful protesters have received the longest ever sentences for non-violent protest, a combined total of 21 years. He says the truth, the whole truth and nothing but cannot exclude the #climate crises. So lots of people completely divided. Here, Just Stop Oil saying that this is outrageous. They've organised petitions and so on and so forth. It really has divided opinion, because there are certain people that literally think the world is about to spontaneously combust, and how we've not all burnt to death already, quite frankly, is a miracle.
Yes, well, the climate change mob from last year, of course, are now being drowned by rain this year. Look, I'm not saying there isn't an argument. All I'm saying is that this argument can't be conducted in this manner. Right, there is a debate about this. We have both sides, actually, of the House who are pretty pretty signed on to climate change and trying to address the issues that we all face through EV and also wind and all the rest of the stuff. But when people start wrecking other people's lives in the name of their protest, then they must expect to go to court. And once you start hearing about 5 years and 4 years, the queue of these people will get smaller. Or if it doesn't, we're going to have to build more jails, which I'm in favour of anyway.
The flip side to this, because there will be many people, Tom, that say, well, hang on a second, because we've got very limited prison space. We're letting people out early already from prison. So then how can this kind of activity be celebrated for sending people to prison? We've got a new Prisons Minister, James Timpson. He's very passionate that not everybody that's in prison should be in prison. He thinks that very few of those people actually should have been sentenced, and he's very passionate about kind of non-jail, I would say punishment, he would perhaps say rehabilitation.
Well, the purpose of prison absolutely should be about rehabilitation, and most prisoners on good behaviour will get out after half their sentence when they go up to the parole board. I suspect the same thing will happen here as well. But the point still stands, and I agree with Calvin on this. If you break the law, if you vandalise the streets, if you prevent people from going about their daily business, then you do have to face the consequences of that, and that's what's clearly happened here.
Dylan, you're quite harsh on the website. You're saying you felt that this was a very light sentence for Just Stop Oil. You're saying that it should have been life in prison. I've got to say, I think that's a bit harsh. I wouldn't agree with that one. One of my, Darryl, actually, one of my viewers, he says, Kelvin just described it as non-violent protest, but that's wrong. Free speech, he says, does not mean that you have the right to violate the rights of others. And violent doesn't necessarily mean physical violence against a person. Lots of people, again, you're really, really divided about this. Jane says that it feels to you like people have been let off lightly because of the situation with overcrowding and so on and so forth in the prisons. Do you share that view? Lots of you... One of you now saying, actually, Thomas says, if we're finally imprisoning people for causing severe disruption, can we convict previous politicians for allowing the immigration crisis? You're saying that that creates severe disruption. Now, I can tell you, you're asking about the immigration crisis. There's been a big European summit today. Keir Starmer, he's been talking about hitting reset, brand new eras and so on and so forth. After the break, I'm going to talk to you about £84 million worth of new funding that Keir Starmer thinks will perhaps try and stem the flow of people migrating from Africa and the Middle East. But before I get onto that part, all of this notion about new ties, the focus on Ukraine, that got a lot of attention today with Keir Starmer reiterating his support to Ukraine. What do you think to that, Kelvin?
Well, I'm delighted that Starmer appears at the moment to be solidly behind Zelensky, who looked, I thought, a reduced figure at that conference today. He has a lot of worries, right? Not connected with Europe. I think they're pretty solid. After all, they can recognise Putin is just over the mountain there, right? 3,000 miles away. It's a different argument. And so I hope that Starmer is going to stay strong. Let's hope he turns out to be stronger than he appeared to be in the Corbyn cabinet when being a Remainer sitting in the Brexit chair. So I don't trust him. He's a lawyer, and it's as simple as that.
Oh, harsh man. Tom?
I thought actually one of the best leadership speeches from Blenheim Palace today, I caught a bit of it earlier, it was actually from the Danish Prime Minister, one of only four, heading one of only four centre-left governments currently in the European Union. I thought the point that she made about how Europe got it wrong in 2014, we appeased Putin then. Mm-hmm. The Germans and the Dutch, for example, agreed the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline in order to get a competitive advantage and get cheap energy into the powerhouse that's German manufacturing. So the fact that she was saying that there can be no appeasement, it's not just good enough anymore to say we need to be arming Ukraine in order to defend itself. We need to be arming Ukraine to win this war. And that's
what does winning the war mean?
Well, it means pushing back the Russian aggression from the Donbass, from these parts of eastern Ukraine, including the Crimea, that have been occupied illegally under international law. And he, as a dictator, needs to respect the borders.
So you want us to be actively involved in attacking Russia?
I don't think that's what actually these European leaders are saying. I think what they're saying is we need to sort of get out of the niceties that somehow you can have F-16s, you can have pretty powerful weapons and air defence systems purely in a defensive posture, that if you've got, for example, Russian troops massing on the Russian-Ukrainian border, albeit on their own side of the border, then under international law, that is a legitimate target, and therefore Ukraine should be given the scope to take the war to the Russians.
I'm massively in favour of arming Zelensky. But the idea that when there is a peace deal that will involve getting Russia to hand back the Crimea, or that we have enough armed forces and attitudes within Western Europe in order to take on Russia, I think is for the birds, man. Because the trouble is that Putin has said, I have more nuclear weapons than the rest of the world put together. I am going to use them against you. Now, I don't know whether he's telling the truth or not, but what I do know is that we do not wish to get involved in that kind of conflict. So there is going to be a deal on all this, and to be honest, it's out of our hands, because if Trump comes in and I notice that his vice president has been at least as tough. If they come in and say, we are not going to arm Ukraine from now onwards, that basically is the end of the war.
What do you make to this one at home? Coming up after the break, I want to discuss with you what Keir Starmer had to say as well. Take a listen.
Stop illegal migration. We must also tackle it at source. So today I'm announcing £84 million of new funding for projects across Africa and the Middle East. That includes humanitarian and health support, skills training, help with job opportunities and access to education. This is a vital part of gripping the migration crisis. And it shows how we're going to do business on the world stage.
Your thoughts on that? I'll see you in 2.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Khloe Kardashian has come under fire after posting a picture of her 6-year-old daughter wearing a full face of makeup.
Yeah, the reality TV star said the youngster was participating in a dance recital and that wasn't an everyday occurrence.
So this morning we're asking, is it ever OK to let children wear makeup?
Well, joining us now is journalist Julie Cook. So, Julie, it's a child wearing full rouge, bright red lipstick, hair tied back, looking very, very stylised, very much, I think, like a young adult. Is this really the sort of thing we should be doing with small children?
Oh, I think it's absolutely fine. I mean, first of all, in Khloe Kardashian's case, it was a dance recital, so it was very much a kind of performance element to it. She said herself in her post, it wasn't something they do every day. She was taking part in a dance activity. So, you know, I think she's vindicated on that front. But I've let my daughter play with makeup since she was 3. When she was 3, she showed a distinct interest in my makeup palettes, going through my stuff. She's 10 now, and while I don't let her wear a full face like a drag queen, I do let her wear, you know, a bit of mascara on a weekend if she wants to. I don't see any harm in it.
Clearly, if you're a child of a Kardashian who's paid millions of dollars to endorse cosmetics, you know, that's part of the fabric of their family. My concern, though, Julie, is putting those pictures on social media where people can see them. We live in an age now where, you know, wrong-uns are scouring the internet all the time.
A lot of girls do enjoy putting makeup on. It's almost like a self-expression thing. It's like painting on a canvas. They're just trying to be a bit artistic. I don't think it's necessarily as sort of sinister as we're making out. And I think as long as you're not posting pictures everywhere or putting them at risk of harm, I don't see any danger.
The People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
TV presenter.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you until 7 o'clock tonight. The fellow you can hear chirping in my ear rudely as we return from the break there is the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie. Alongside him, much politer, much better behaved, much more professional, I say, visiting Professor of Education at the University of Staffordshire, Tom Buick. Welcome back, everybody. Look, I'm going to play you a clip now. I just played you it before the break. It's Keir Starmer. He's just been announcing quite a new policy. Take a listen.
Stop illegal migration. We must also tackle it at source. So today I'm announcing £84 million of new funding for projects across Africa and the Middle East. That includes humanitarian and health support, skills training, help with job opportunities and access to education. This is a vital part of gripping the migration crisis. And it shows how we're going to do business on the world stage.
Bold new era. Many people say it was the migration election and all the rest of it. So how Keir Starmer is going to approach the problem, for example, of the small boats, has been the talk of the town among many people. He said about this whole sentence about getting tough and smashing the gangs and all the rest of it, whatever. We've heard that many, many times. This £84 million, though, to try and stop the problem, quote, at source. What do you think to that, Kelvin?
Well, it's a nice thing to do. If we had a spare £84 million, right, by all means, educate people in Africa and the Middle East and the like. The idea, the linkage that I do dislike intentionally, first of all, we haven't got 84 million, but the most important aspect is the idea that in some way this will be linked to stopping migration. The reason people are on the move is because there's either a war or some terrible conflagration in their country, and they want to come to a country which will supply them with money and possibly work and generally a higher standard of living. And £84 million is neither here nor there. He's got to say something, and so he said 84. He might have well said 184, or he might have said 8 and 4. It doesn't really matter. So I think he wants to solve this. I'm pleased that somebody wants to solve it. I've been listening to this tosh now from the Tories now for the last 10 years, and now I hope I'm not going to listen to the same tosh from the Labour Party.
Tom?
Well, the tosh that you heard from the Tories was the Rwanda scheme, which is going to cost, according to the National Audit Office, $150,000 per migrant for the 0.1% that if those planes had took off, we would have got out to Rwanda. But what I think is really good about these pictures coming out of Blenheim Palace today, of course, the birthplace of one Mr Winston Churchill, very famous Prime Minister, is it feels like Britain is back on the world stage, and that Sir Keir Starmer, our new Prime Minister, is using the full panoply of British statecraft to start to get some deals done around how collectively, not just in Britain, but around Europe and around the world, we face this global migration challenge. Because you're quite right. A lot of this is driven part by climate, part by war, part by economic migrants as well that come across the Schengen zone. I mean, 300,000 people enter the European Union's borders every year. And what I want to see, actually, a Labour Prime Minister now do is kick on, not just announce, as you say, £84 million for Africa, but I understand he's having dinner, a one-to-one dinner with President Macron this evening. I think on the menu, as well as some foie gras, should be a returns agreement with France, because I think we all know if we smash that business model where people can get in a boat, come over to Calais and then have their claims processed, That's what's driving this vile trade.
You see, he now says, I'm a DPP, I know how to smash gangs, OK? Actually, perhaps he should go into North London and see the drugs war between the two aspects of...
Well, that's a separate point.
No. Well, the point I'm making is smashing gangs is not easy. And when you're making £200,000 and £300,000 per boat that's coming over,
sure,
you're going to be cleverer than the people trying to disrupt.
But what I'm saying, Calvin, is that if we're going to really break this business model, just Border Command smashing the gangs, giving more money to the French police, etc., to carry on doing what they're doing is essentially watching these craft launch from the shores of Calais. That is not going to break the business model of the gangs. What will break the business model is if there's some kind of agreement with the EU as part of their migration pact. I mean, I did some basic maths earlier. Based on that 300,000 that come across the EU's borders, if we opted into that migration pact, we'd have to take maybe 29,000 processed asylum seekers or migrants each year. That's far less than the 50,000 that we're on course again, another record-breaking year, to take. Look, what would the British people prefer?
OK, Tom.
The gangs making money,
we're here next year.
Over.
We're here next year. I'm not sure whether Michelle's going to be here, but if we're here next year...
He's got some inside information.
Right. No, if we're here next year, do you expect the boats still to be coming across the water, or will you be saying, actually, we've solved it and we are now going to take 30, 40, 50, 100,000 part of the European payout?
I don't want to get into the predictions game, Calvin, but I can see already in relation to the legal migration challenge, we've just had a record year, 700,000 people have come in, but policies that are already in train...
Conservative policies.
...by the last government...
Conservative policies.
...will result by this time next year, legal migration halving. I think if Keir Starmer and his government can get this deal on a returns agreement with France/EU, then if in a year's time the boats have stopped and legal migration has been reduced by half, I think the Labour government will take that.
Yes, no, and I tell you what, the Conservatives would have done as well. They were lamentable. It's probably the most shocking political kind of impotence I have ever seen. And on that respect, they deserve to be slung out. And if that happened, that would also be the end of reform. So I suspect. So there's a big prize to be had, and I hope the boats are stopped. I don't really care who stops them. I would have preferred the Tories to have done it. They turned out to be useless.
But hold on a second. So I just want to, right, on the one hand, we're constantly getting told we've got no money, there is no money. Oh, I've opened these books and goodness me, it's so scary. It's 100 times worse than I ever imagined. We're going to have to tighten our belts. We're in for a tough time, all the rest of it. That's what goes on domestically within this country and the problems that are faced here. But it does feel a little bit like when it's any other country's problems, we can shake this magic money tree to goodness knows how many times per minute, and all of this cash is rattling out. Why is there this constant sense that we have no money to fix problems here, but we have this infinite supply of cash to farm out the country? Exactly. We have a foreign aid budget, and I mean, that is running into the multiples of millions of pounds. That is apparently supposed to be spent on helping different countries here, there and everywhere. Why is it not working? What analysis has been done as to the effectiveness of the billions that we're spending before we've just announced nearly another £100 million?
And where does it all go anyway? You know, what seems to happen is that the people, these dictators who run various countries around the world seem to get bigger and bigger cars on our money. We are not a successful nation at the moment. Right? We haven't got the growth. We haven't got the growth of China. We haven't got the growth of a lot of countries. And the idea that we give away our money from the times when we were successful, right, is preposterous. Now, the argument that's given against this, as long as we keep paying the money to these people, they won't invade us, effectively. That's what they're saying. They won't come to our country. Actually, I don't buy that. I think that actually giving them the money is a complete waste of time. It's a nice thing to do if we were doing well. Now, you might argue that because we're the sixth richest nation on earth, we should have some largesse. I'm not wholly against that, but just to stand up there, grandstanding in front of a load of other countries who will turn around and say, well, hold on a second, mate, 84 million is neither here nor there. Why are you saying all this? Starmer is actually doing something quite clever, which Tom referred to before we came on air, which is actually he's beginning to fight the second election rather than the one he's just won.
And I want to just pick you up as well. You mentioned, the applauding of scrapping Rwanda, and I'm sure I saw you nodding your head in agreement. I think it's absolutely absurd that this deterrent that we've spent an absolute small fortune on has been scrapped on day one, to me, almost as some kind of symbolic, look at us, high five everyone, we're different to the Tories. That's why I feel that that's been scrapped. I don't share this notion that you think it's kind of like a ridiculous, kind of almost like a fantasy strategy. And I just wonder, when people applaud the scrapping of the Rwanda plan, how do you know it wouldn't have been an effective deterrent?
Because cross-channel boats are up 12% on last year. The legislation on Rwanda went through Parliament. There was all the grandstanding by
But it hadn't happened, had it? It hadn't been enacted.
Yeah, but people were clutching at straws, I remember, talking about even, for example, people going across to Ireland, that was some sort of deterrent because of the Rwanda scheme. Then we had, they're all waiting for a Labour government.
That's true. That's true.
No...
It's true that people were choosing to go to Ireland and they were citing the Rwanda plans as a deterrent. So my question to you is, you're all applauding the ripping up of this policy, which we've spent millions upon millions on. Why didn't it have, you know, we spent all this money, we've got this far, why don't we see it through, why don't we see what happens and then see whether or not it's a deterrent? It didn't happen, so how do you know it wasn't an effective deterrent?
Well, this is all a hypothetical now because we've had the election, that argument was had and...
No, but you're applauding the ripping up of it.
I'm applauding...
But I'm asking you, how do you know it wasn't going to be an effective deterrent?
That for a scheme that maximum was going to deport around, 0.5% of the numbers that come across on current numbers across the channel,
but
costing,
that's
as I say, £150,000 according to the National Audit Office. That's not the way to do policy or internet. Well, I mean, it's a hypothetical, I'll give you that. But the point is, that argument is lost. We've had the election. What I think we're seeing today as part of this European political community is Britain back on the world stage.
You're not answering my question.
Right.
You're just saying to me, the argument's lost, the decision's been made.
Michelle,
I'm
you and I
asking
share the same objective. We want to see these boats, as indeed I think the majority of British people do, stop across the channel. The issue is, how do you achieve that? Rwanda's been and gone. More cabinet ministers went out to Rwanda.
It hasn't been and gone.
Well, the scheme has been and gone.
To the edge, and then it was scrapped.
Yeah, it's been scrapped because we had an election. That's called democracy.
That 20% of people voted for, but anyway.
Yeah, but what we've got now, Michelle, is this opportunity, in part with things like this aid package to Africa, but for me, the real prize, and I do hope this is the discussion with President Macron as we speak at Blenheim Palace, is to get the French to agree that anybody that gets escorted currently to the 12-mile line in the Channel by the French Coast Guard is taken straight back to Calais, and that their claim for asylum...
At what cost?
Well, I think the cost will be as having to opt in to some kind of EU-wide migration pact, which, as I say, if it's based on the quota system that those other EU countries have agreed, it's 29,000 asylum seekers, which we would process before they arrived. I mean, at the moment, you look at the profile of the boats that are coming over, the majority of them are young men. How many families are coming across the Channel fleeing war and persecution? What I'd like to see is a proper scheme whereby we take people, we know who's coming in advance. One of the other announcements today, according to the Times, is we're opting into the EU's fingerprinting database. That means when people do arrive, these migrants do arrive in Dover, we know who they are and we don't have to go through the process.
I think one of the problems that...
I think that's common sense pragmatism, Calvin. And for a change, I actually see you nodding along to a lot of what I said.
Yeah, I was actually deceiving you.
Actually,
I should have been shaking my head, but I just decided to fool you into believing that I agree with you. I think the issue on Rwanda is it wasn't a big enough... There wasn't a big enough win for us, right? So that's why I wasn't totally hostile to it. I quite liked the PR of it. It was quite expensive, but I didn't honestly believe it would work. So I agree with Farage in that respect. But one of the problems that I do see is with 30,000, we're saying 40,000 coming in every year, the problem will not go away because how many more are coming in on trucks and various other forms of deception? Who can tell? So actually, even although I thought Farage would be damaged by any kind of returning the boats deal, actually, there will still be a problem. 40,000 a year. Why can't we just do the following? Why don't we just have visas like they do in the Middle East for people who want work here?
There you go. He's fixed it, you see, in a nanosecond. Kelvin for Prime Minister, some people will be saying, with their fingers crossed behind their backs. Look, Park Lane, if you've ever played Monopoly, you'll know that that's one of the most expensive squares on the board, one of the most prestigious London addresses. You won't believe how it currently looks. I'll show you in two.
Hello, very good evening to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. There could be some heavy, possibly even thundery rain this weekend, but before then, a lot of fine and hot weather around. That being said, there is a weather system affecting parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland through the end of today, bringing a bit more cloud and some outbreaks of rain here, though the rain will be easing overnight, so turning mostly dry. Meanwhile, across the bulk of England and Wales, it's a dry night with largely clear skies, albeit a few pockets of fog. A bit more cloud perhaps towards western parts. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount, a bit difficult for sleeping for some of us, some places holding up in the high teens Celsius, though a little bit cooler towards the northwest. And then tomorrow, it is going to be a hot day for many of us, particularly in the south. And starting off looking first thing, a fine picture, lots of sunshine through the morning. And once the sun comes up, those temperatures will quickly start to rise. A bit further north, it's looking cloudier, not as cloudy as today. And there may be a bit of rain around over higher ground, but on the whole, it's a dry start to the day as well. There may even be some sunshine breaking through, particularly towards the Moray coast and northern parts of Aberdeenshire as well. But as we go through the day, I'm expecting a bit of rain to start to push its way in towards the Outer Hebrides and some blustery winds developing here. Elsewhere, largely dry, one or two showers perhaps, but the general theme will be that there's plenty of sunshine around, especially across England and Wales. And with that, even hotter than today, temperatures rising into the low 30s Celsius towards the southeast and the mid to high 20s across many other areas. Some further wet weather then is going to push its way in across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland as we go into Saturday. Perhaps some of that rain reaching into western parts of England and Wales as well. Further east, it's staying drier, and here we should still have some hot weather for a time, but there is the potential for some thunderstorms to develop on Saturday night. Then Sunday's looking a bit changeable, with things turning cooler by next week.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Gary King. In Essex, the anti-clockwise M25. There's a lane closed on the exit slip road at junction 30 at Lakeside. It's due to emergency resurfacing repairs. Also in Essex, the southbound A12, long delays after an earlier vehicle fire around junction 25 at Marks Tay. In Berkshire, the westbound M4, there's a lane closed and long delays after a vehicle fire between the M25 and junction 5 at Langley. Delays though back towards junction 4 at Heathrow. In Cambridgeshire, the northbound M11, the exit slip road at junction 12 for Cambridge is partly blocked. Long delays there following an accident. And at Shropshire, the eastbound M54, traffic stationary after a vehicle fire. That's between junction 3 at Albrighton and at junction 2 at Wolverhampton. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. Till 7 o'clock, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, is alongside me, as is the visiting Professor of Education at the University of Staffordshire, Tom Buick. Good afternoon and good evening, actually, to each and every one of you. Listen, I was driving along, as you do. Well, actually, just before many will say, what are you doing filming if you're driving? I was in a taxi, actually, earlier on this week, and something caught my eye, and I filmed it. And look, here we go. I put it on the screen. And I put it on social media. It went somewhat viral. Over 5 million people have seen this tweet. Now, the graphic that I'm showing you, or the video I'm showing to you, this is the central carriageway on Park Lane in London. Very expensive address, probably one of the most prestigious, quite frankly. And it's now become what I'm going to bluntly describe as some kind of tent city. So many tents there have popped up. It's got like a whole kind of community thing going on. I was absolutely shocked when I saw this. Kelvin Mackenzie, what do you think to this? I mean, this is not good to have this kind of setup in modern-day Britain. No. People living on in tents on sides of busy roads.
It's a disgrace. And what worries me about it is, why does it take your tweet to focus on something which must have been obvious even to Mayor Khan, even to the owners of the land, Transport for London? Why they own that piece of land in the middle of Park Lane is totally beyond me. And also beyond the Westminster Council, who are actually in charge of keeping that place clear. And who are these people? This is the next question. I think you've been there, haven't you?
Yes, well, I know the answer to that because I went over to the camp to talk to people. When I was there was only a couple of people there, and I asked them their stories, and they told me that they're from Romania and Bulgaria. They told me that there's about 50 of them residing there, that they were not family, but they were friends. I asked what they were doing there, and they said that they were homeless. I was chatting away to them, and I asked about working, getting jobs, etc. They said that they didn't have any paperwork. I asked them, do you want to tell me your story? We can try and raise a spotlight. We can try and get you some help or support. And then I've got to say, the person that I was speaking to, which is, I think, the person on the screen now, got incredibly aggressive towards me. The second I mentioned filming, trying to share the story, I was really met with a huge amount of abuse, vitriol, aggression, whatever you want to determine it to be, and then off they went. They would not consent to being filmed at all when I was speaking to them.
First thing, Michelle, I just think this is a awful humanitarian crisis on our streets that you just don't expect to see in the 6th largest economy of the world. I mean, these pictures, frankly, you used to see these in the global south, or even now on, sadly, some of our American cities like Los Angeles. It's a real failing, I think, in housing policy. We have this antiquated housing law that, for example, if you're in a family, you will be housed in temporary accommodation if you fall on hard times, if you're homeless. If you're single and male, then you have no recourse to any housing support whatsoever. And what I find really disappointing about these pictures, and generally, actually, when you look at the numbers now that are rough sleeping, just in London alone, it's over 1,000 people a night, according to the charity Crisis. That's a 27% increase just on last year. So this is a thing that's not going away. It's getting worse. And do you remember during the pandemic, rough sleeping was ended when we had the lockdowns. So we seem to have the means of accommodating people, doing the outreach, getting them into supported housing. Why have we got one of the most expensive streets in Britain?
I don't consider it part of my taxpayer dollar. Should be going to helping Romanians, Hungarians and various other people, which sound as though they're from Eastern Europe. Why don't we do... I mean, we've got Starmer on there saying, I'm going to smash the gangs, I'm going to stop these people coming here. You can't even stop people coming from Eastern Europe. Why don't we return them? Why don't we just collect the lot up, say, what is your nationality, go back and just send a truck and send them back again? We won't... Starmer says smash something. We've got a mayor who doesn't say anything about it. And were it not for Michelle, nobody would know anything about this story, would they? Nobody. And yet 5 million people are now alerted to the problem. So what are we going to do about it? I am not going to spend my taxpayer dollar actually putting up single men from Eastern Europe in my country. I don't want them here in the first place, and they shouldn't be here in the second place.
What I found very odd, because I'm very passionate, I don't believe anyone should be sleeping on the streets, and I found it incredibly sad, and I do talk to a lot of homeless people, actually, and try and help where I can. And when you hear some of the stories, they are tragic. There's so many British people that have fallen on hard times. And I always say, we're just, all of us, really, we're just a paycheck or two away from our circumstances changing. But, notwithstanding any of that, I do find it quite peculiar that you can choose to go to a different city with no means, seemingly, of supporting yourself, and that no one seems to have ownership of this problem, because I got in touch with the MP that's responsible for this location. She just said that she wasn't in a position to be able to comment. I got in touch with the council. They basically said that it was the responsibility of TfL, which is Transport for London. And then they went on to say that they spend £7 million a year trying to help rough sleeping. I then got in touch with TfL and we asked them, what's the situation with these people? They said that no one should be faced with sleeping rough, and that we will continue to work with our partners, including Westminster City Council, etc., to help safeguard those sleeping rough. So I just found it very odd. There's so much buck passing there. When I asked these people, they said that they'd been there for months on end. And I asked them, did the police come along? And they said no, they just leave us alone, basically. So it's a very peculiar scenario, and there's no one that's kind of doing well out of this. The people, I don't know whether or not they want to be there. No one seems to want to fix the situation. So what is the answer to it? Perhaps you've got that answer at home. Get in touch with me and let me know your thoughts on that. Lots I want to talk to you about before we finish the programme. I want to ask about parental control. Do you think the state is overreaching when it comes to some of those? And also, as well, would you be inclined to join the police? Your thoughts?
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
Well, I'm joined now by royal biographer and former royal photographer, Ian Lloyd. Ian,
hello, Jacob.
Thank you Good evening. Thank you for joining me. This is going to be great, isn't it? The opportunity to go around and see where the King comes onto the balcony from. Really interesting insight to how Buckingham Palace works.
It's exciting. I went yesterday, there was a press preview, and the thing that struck me first of all is that if you're the King and or the late Queen and you're on the balcony, you can't see the Mall. I mean, we all see people coming down from the top, you know, thousands of people crowding in towards Buckingham Palace. They can't see it because of this great monument to Queen Victoria called the Queen Victoria Memorial, or they call it the wedding cake, but it blocks the view. So apparently the King has a TV in there. And the late Queen did as well. So what they do is they when they're waiting to come on, they're watching the TV to see how the crowd's getting nearer the palace. And the other thing that struck me is when we were on it looking down, is you can actually see individual faces in the crowd out there, because we looked out, you know. So they do get a good view of what's happening directly underneath the palace, you know.
So they can see individuals. So if there's a friendly face in the crowd, they can see that person and possibly even wave. But they can't see that enormous mass of people you get at the big events that goes back towards Admiralty Arch.
The other thing I learned is there's a great historical link, because the person that put the east wing on the palace, because it was originally 3 sides, and Queen Victoria had, of course, 9 children, so they had to build a 4th side for all the nurseries and things. Edward Blord was the architect, but the master builder was Thomas Cubitt.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
That raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. Till 7, Kelvin McKenzie and Tom Buick remain alongside me. Now, as a parent, I've got to confess, I do actually believe that the responsibility of parenting my child lays squarely and exclusively with me. But I can't help but feel that there are certain things happening at the moment which feels to me that somehow the state seem to feel that they are responsible for parenting children. There's many examples of this that pop up. There's some close to home here. So now, for example, children, one of the policies now, we're going to have supervised toothbrushing in schools. We're going to be making sure that children have their meals in school, for example, breakfast. I saw a story in California, and people will say that they're completely different, but to me, the premise is the same. Elon Musk was tweeting out that there's been this new bill written into law in California, which is basically saying that if a child changes their pronouns at school, you're not allowed to tell the parents. Elon Musk has said, you know, that's the final straw. He's going to remove his headquarters of his businesses and go to different places.
Yep.
This notion of where parenting stops and the state begins, do you feel it's getting blurred, Kelvin?
Yeah, and I have no idea why they would want to do it. So they're going to introduce free breakfasts for everybody, right? What a ridiculous idea. How much is that going to cost? And why are those that can afford it, why on earth, which is, we'll say, 60, 70, 80% of the, I don't know what percentage of families are struggling for breakfast, and if they are struggling for breakfast, then the money, that benefit money is going in a very odd place in that household, more likely down the bedding shop. So why are we having to fund
generalisation there, Kelvin?
Well, it's going somewhere. It's going on alcohol, betting. It's certainly not going on food. The idea that parents aren't making a priority with their benefit money of feeding their own children is an absolute disgrace, and anybody who comes on, any parent comes on saying, I'm so skint, I can't give my son, Cocoa Pops before he goes to school, is absolutely telling pork pies.
Well, it's taken till the fourth segment for the blood pressure tablets to finally come out from Calvin Mackenzie with his red top rage.
Yeah.
Look, on the early years breakfast, it's absolutely right, Calvin, that we make sure all of our kids, in a universal way, get one decent meal a day, which is, I think all the scientists agree is probably the most important meal of the day. And look, as someone that, grew up in care and someone that was eligible for free school meals, I still remember the stigma. When the things like milk used to be universal in primary schools, and then it was means tested.
Yeah.
You knew the kids who were from the poor home because they had the means tested milk and those that didn't. So, look, I think it's the least we can do as a civilised country to make sure all of our children get off to a good start at school.
But I'm talking about, I'm not saying that if you're skin, I'm not saying if you're skin, I'm saying what happens if you can afford it. You've got a mortgage, you've got a car, you've got this.
Means testing versus universal. But just on the key point about state nannying, I think we've overreacted to this story. I remember also growing up, we had things like the Green Cross Code, we had, again, all sorts of public information campaigns. This is just, I think, responsible government making sure that parenting and all of our kids get the best start.
But isn't that a slippery slope, though? Because what's after... So we're going to do supervised toothbrushing. We're going to do provided and supervised eating. What's going to be next?
I think it's all about ensuring that all of our kids get the best possible start in life, Michelle. I don't think there's anything sinister about that. What is more troubling, in my view, is what's going on in California, where the idea that, how can you be responsible for a minor as a parent if the school won't tell you what's going on?
That California story really did raise my eyebrows. I can tell you, let's hope nothing like that does come to this country. And of course, I want all children, by the way, just to be cared for. I want them all to be loved and looked after. But perhaps what we also need, instead of, in addition, perhaps, to caring for all these children, maybe we need to start educating people how to be better parents. Maybe there is an idea. You can have that one for free, Keir Starmer. I'm off. I'll see you tomorrow. Nigel Farage up next. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. There could be some heavy, possibly even thundery rain this weekend, but before then, a lot of fine and hot weather around. That being said, there is a weather system affecting parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland through the end of today, bringing a bit more cloud and some outbreaks of rain here, though the rain will be easing overnight, so turning mostly dry. Meanwhile, across the bulk of England and Wales, it's a dry night with largely clear skies, albeit a few pockets of fog. A bit more cloud perhaps towards western parts. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount, a bit difficult for sleeping for some of us, some places holding up in the high teens Celsius, though a little bit cooler towards the northwest. And then tomorrow, it is going to be a hot day for many of us, particularly in the south. And starting off looking first thing, a fine picture, lots of sunshine through the morning. And once the sun comes up, those temperatures will quickly start to rise. A bit further north, it's looking cloudier, not as cloudy as today. And there may be a bit of rain around over higher ground, but on the whole, it's a dry start to the day as well. There may even be some sunshine breaking through, particularly towards the Moray coast and northern parts of Aberdeenshire as well. well. But as we go through the day, I'm expecting a bit of rain to start to push its way in towards the Outer Hebrides and some blustery winds developing here. Elsewhere, largely dry, 1 or 2 showers perhaps, but the general theme will be that there's plenty of sunshine around, especially across England and Wales. And with that, even hotter than today, temperatures rising into the low 30s Celsius towards the southeast and the mid to high 20s across many other areas. Some further wet weather then is going to push its way in across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland as we go into Saturday. Perhaps some of that rain reaching into western parts of England and Wales as well. Further east, it's staying drier, and here we should still have some hot weather for a time, but there is the potential for some thunderstorms to develop on Saturday night. Then Sunday's looking a bit changeable, with things turning cooler by next week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Gary King. In Essex at Orsett, the A13 at Stamford, the Hope bypass, currently blocked westbound, long delays building after an accident involving 3 lorries just near to Orsett Cog. In Berkshire, the westbound M4 has a lane closed and delays. That's due to a vehicle fire between the M25 and Junction 5 at Langley. Delays still going back towards Junction 4 at Heathrow. In Cambridgeshire, the northbound M11, still the exit slip road partly blocked at Junction 12 for Cambridge. Delays there following an accident. And in Shropshire, the eastbound M54 looking busy after an earlier vehicle fire between Junction 3 at Albrighton and Junction 2 at Wolverhampton. And no trains on Great Northern between Welwyn Garden City and Potters Bar, and that's due to signalling problems. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
Oh, I can't believe this.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh, you shocked me. I never won a penny in my life.
If I was there, I'd buy you a drink.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2.